Good morning. And we just want to say a special good morning as well to our visitors who has just walked in. We want to thank you for visiting us here at Grace. We appreciate you taking the time out to spend with us, and we want to show appreciation by singing a song for you. So we're going to ask you to keep seated while the rest of us stand and sing the welcome song. Okay, thank you again for coming and spend some time with us. I would like to read this morning from the book of Numbers, and I will read Numbers chapter 13, and we will pick and choose a few verses as we go along. So, chapter 13 and verse 1. And the Lord said unto Moses, Send thou men, that they must search out the land of Canaan, which I have given unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall he send a man, every one a ruler among them. Then we'll go down to 21. So they went up and they searched the land from the wilderness of Zin and Rahab to the men, as men came to Hamath. 25. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And 27. And they told him, that is Moses and Aaron and the rest of the children of Israel, they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sendest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit thereof. We trust God to bless the reading and the explanation of his word for his name's sake. Now I want to talk a little bit this morning about don't believe everything you hear. Now it seems kind of trivial to say that because we don't actually believe everything we hear. It sounds kind of, simple. But if you think about it, depends on who gives you a story. It is more likely you will believe it or not believe it. For example, if someone should come off the street and gives you a story about space and the things that you will find on space and what you could expect is up there, you will listen to them, and it wouldn't stay with you as long as, or the time that they were with you, meaning by the time they leave you, you will forget what they told you because you're not taking it seriously. But if an astronaut comes and tells you, this is what happens in space, that is what to expect in space, it's a totally different story. Because we know he went to space, so he has all the information. So what is going to happen and what we're going to see here, I hope to talk about, is people with first-hand information sharing it with others. And did they believe it or didn't they believe it? And if they did, what happened? And if they didn't, what was the result? But before we get into it, we read about the Israelites or the children of Israel. So let's just go back a little bit into history. When we say the children of Israel or the Israelites, who were those people? Now, when we talk about Egypt, people are from Egypt are called Egyptians. Or if you're from America, you are called Americans. So the Israelites, were they called Israelites because of where they were from? Well, not really. They got their name because of not a place, but because of people. And we read of the two sons, or two brothers, Jacob and Esau, the children of, I think it's Isaac and Rebekah. One of the sons' name was changed to Israel. And he had 12 sons. And the Bible tells us that the 12 sons actually represent a tribe. So you have 12 tribes of Israel. And so this is where the Israelite came in. So again, it's not because of a place, but because of the ancestors coming down from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and Israel having sons, and they got the name from that. But not only that, how did they get to where, as we have seen, and as we would go over a few scriptures, they moved from Egypt and they was about to enter the promised land? How did they get to Egypt? Now, again, we know the story that there was a famine in their land, and Joseph was sent to Egypt. He was prepared for that purpose, to prepare the way for them. So because of the famine, they went to Egypt. But that's one part of the story. The second part of the story, and which is most important, is found in Genesis chapter 15. So yes, there was a famine, and yes, they went to Egypt to find a better life, if we should say. Genesis chapter 15 and verse 13 tells us, and he said, as again the Lord speaking to Abraham said, know of assuredly that the seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, that's the Egyptians, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. The point here is God had ordained or predestinated that direction or situation to fall upon the children of Israel, or the Israelites. So it's not something that happened by chance. The Lord said that is going to happen, and it did happen. He predicted that they were going to be there for 400 years, and they spent 400 years in slavery. That tells us that when God says something, and when God predicts something, we can be assured it is going to come to pass. Although men will try to come up with ideas and situations to have us believe certain things, the only one we can trust fully is God. And whenever he comes up with something, we can depend on it. So the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves for 400 years. Now at this point, the only people that were there was the people who came after, meaning that the original people were all gone. Generations after generations would have died because of the length of time they were in bondage. So that at this point that we are looking at, the only people that were there, that is all they would know. They wouldn't have any idea or experience of any other life. They were born into slavery. But were they satisfied to be in the condition they were in? Were they satisfied to say, okay, this is where I was born, this is the condition, so I'm just going to accept it? Were they satisfied to say there is nothing anyone can do? Because for all these years, my parents and my parents' parents before me went through it. And if God is out there and he is listening, then surely he would have done something about it before now. So did they give up? Did they accept their faith? Let's look at Genesis chapter 17. And see what happens here. So Genesis 17, verse 1 and 2. And when Abraham was 90 years old and 99 years old, the Lord appeared unto Abraham and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thy seed greatly. And verse 8, and I will give unto thee and unto thy seed the land wherewith, or the land wherein that thou is a stranger, and the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. We see here that the Lord is making a promise to them. Again, as I said earlier, that when God says something, you can rest on it. And although they have been there for so many years, that is all they know. All they had to go by was the promise of God. And it's no different with us today. We have not been to heaven. We don't know exactly what heaven is. But we know it is a place that God has gone to prepare for us. And it seems as though at times we are here like forever. There are things we might be going through, or we might be going through in our lives, and we can't wait to get rid of it. We can't wait for the time when we no longer have to feel what we are feeling or going through what we are going through. And it will seem as though it is 400 years. But what I'm saying to you and to us and to myself this morning, that God has promised us a land. And he is faithful to fulfill that promise. So we are not to be discouraged. We are not to give up, because he has promised, and his promise is true. Now we reach to the point where things are about to happen. He made the promise, and the Lord is about to fulfill the promise. And so in Exodus chapter 3, things are starting to move forward. Exodus 3 and verse 7 and 8. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of the people which are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry by the reason of their taskmasters, and I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites. Now, I read the description, and I want you to pay attention to those descriptions. Because if God had promised them a land without giving them the details, it is very possible that when they get to a land, they might be confused. They mightn't be sure, is it really this is the land that the Lord is talking about? Is it that what he promised us? But the Lord, he went into great detail to tell them what to expect, who will be there, the type of land, so that they'll have no excuse when the time comes not to accept it. So he made it clear to them. So we read now that the Lord himself, after hearing the cry and seeing what they're going through, decide to do something. For some of us, we might be in bondage. We might be in a situation for many years. The question is, does God really see? Is God seeing what is going through, what you are going through? Even though you think no one cares and no one sees, I want to let you know that God sees. Not only does he see, he hears your cry. And he decides to take action. And he himself is coming down to do something about it. He's not letting anyone else take control of the situation. He is coming down to do something. So now we get to Numbers chapter 13. And the Lord is speaking unto Moses. And he is telling Moses and Aaron to send 12 men who are spies, or to spy out the land. Now, it's important to realize that the men they are sending was just not ordinary men. Those men, they were leaders, they were rulers. So if anyone were to believe, if anyone is giving a report and you expect to believe them, you would look to believe a ruler. Had he just picked up any old man or any 12 men and sent them, some people might even doubt them. But those men were men of responsibilities. They were well known among the congregation, and they had a task. My encouragement to us this morning, those in authority, those that are rulers, and it could be in any field, it could be in the Sunday school or on a trip, the mission trip, whatever it is, but you are someone in authority, you're someone that is ruling. The report that we give to the people, the message that we give to the people, we must pay attention to what is it we are given. Because as we would see, the people believe their leaders. And the report that the leaders gave had a very lasting effect on the congregation and ultimately their lives. So let us, as we lead, as we rule, that we do so in the fear of God, not giving our opinion, but always giving the word as God will have us to give, and to depending on him first to lead us as we lead. So here it is, the men went out to spy. It's interesting again to note that between verse 13 and 14, the names of everyone was given. So again, that people will recognize who are the leaders and to be in a position to obey them. Now the leaders were leading and bringing a report to, as it were, 2 million people at that point. So it was 12 men, and they had the influence of 2 million people. So that indeed was a large number. But what we find in verse 8, coming down with the list of the names of the people, which is very important, we see in verse 8 of chapter 13, of the tribe of Ephraim, Asher, the son of Nun. But what is even more interesting, that in verse 16, the latter part of 16, we see that Moses called Asher, the son of Nun, Joshua. So his name was changed. Now, why was his name changed? Now, we're dealing with, in today's society, people change their names all the time. And for one reason or the other, which I really didn't go into, I remember Prince changing his name to a symbol, and you have, I think Kanye changed it to Ye or Ye or whatever. But here, the name change had a significance to it. Now, She means I will deliver, or I will save. So the children of Israel was living the wilderness, and they were supposed to enter the promised land. And so She, meaning I will be the Savior, it's very easy to pin being transferred or being delivered onto She, because this is his name. It means I deliver or I save. So Moses, realizing that he wouldn't be around eventually when they will cross into the land, but Joshua would be the one to take them over, he changed his name to Joshua. And what does Joshua mean? God the deliverer. So there is no mistaking who would be the one to take them from the wilderness into the promised land, which is Joshua. Now, go back to verse 1. Even verse 2, it says, send the men that they may search the land which I have given unto them. There is no doubt that God had decided. He has decided that they will receive the land. So it doesn't matter what comes up after that. I don't want to say all they had to do, because it's more complicated than that. But the right thing to do was to trust God and to believe that he is able to carry it out. God has made promises through his word. And it is for us to ask ourselves, do we always follow his promises? Do we accept his promises? Do we lay hold on the promises, even when it seems as though it's not going to happen, even though when it seems that the opposite is happening. My encouragement for us today is to lay hold on God's promises, because his promises are true and they will never change. Now the spies, they went in, they spied the land, and they came back with their report. Now let's see what was the report that they came back with. Now before that, they were given instructions. Okay, before they went out to spy, they had specific instructions. And in verse 17, Moses said unto them, "Go and check it out." He told them where to enter and to go into the mountains. And you're going to see the land, what it is. The people that dwell in it, are they strong, or they weak, or they many, or they few? Is it good? Is the land good or bad? Is the cities, are they walled, or the people living in tents? Is it fat? Is it lean? He gives a description as to what the people should do. Again, he was being very specific. But nowhere in his instructions did he say, when you come back, tell us what you think. They were not to have or to form their own opinion. They were supposed to go and see and report directly as they saw conditions that existed in that land. But what happened? They came back and they admitted to Moses that yes, everything about the land that we read in Exodus that God said is true. The people that he described, they dwell in the land. The land was indeed flowing with milk and honey. Now, when we say the land is flowing with milk and honey, I remember as a kid, used to think something like a stream, and that stream, milk and honey was flowing down the stream. But it's nothing like that. It simply means that abundance, and God is providing for his people in abundance. Or the land is fertile. It is good for agriculture and for farming. So basically, the milk and honey just speaks of abundance. But it came back, 10 of those 12 came back with their report. And they admitted that the land was good. But it didn't end there. They said, they used the word but, and that makes all the difference. They said what God said was true, everything checked out, but there is a but. And in verse 27, and they told him and said, we came into the land wherein they were sent us, and surely it flowed with milk and honey. And this is the fruit. So they brought back some of the fruit to prove that it was a good land. But verse 28, some translation has nevertheless, but some have but. Let me say this, when God gives us an instruction, and when we know for sure that God is telling us to do something, using but is not a good idea. Because the word but tells us, or it nullifies everything that went before. So what the spies were saying basically is that God was right, but to a point. He didn't fully understand that the people we saw, they were terrible people. They were giants. He said that the land was eating up itself. So there is no way we can go up and take that land. Again, we read it is better to obey God than man. And if he already gave them the land, there shouldn't be anything standing in their way to going up and possessing it. But alas, they used the word of the 10 spies and the word but, which came in to put doubt in their mind. What is interesting also about this whole situation as the spies came back is what they saw. Now, 12 men went out to spy, and they spied the same thing. They observed the same land. They went in together. But 10 came back with a different report. Now, why is it if we all looking at the same thing, some will have a totally different view or perspective to the others? They all should see the same thing because you all went out to look at the same thing. Well, someone once wrote, Marilyn Welch, in her book, The Wolf You Feed, she wrote, two men looked through a prison cell, or the prison bars. One saw mud, and the other saw stars. And this illustration, it illustrates the fact that two people can see the same thing, but each perceive something diametrically different. And this is exactly what happened to the spies. The 10 saw something entirely different from the other two. And what made a difference? They gave their own opinion. And the job that they were sent to do was to report. They forgot what God said in His Word. They forgot God totally. And they were just now expecting or looking at men and men's results, or what man had to say. It is one thing to hear what man has to say, but it's something totally different when it comes to believing. Who are we going to believe? Whose opinions are we going to take? Now, what caused the men to say something totally different, the 10? It is basically who they feared or who they were looking at. They forget totally that God was in control, and He Himself was going to take them through. So we are not to look at what man can do or what man says is the best path for us or is the right path, but it is always what God prescribes, and we need to have faith. Dead doubt in the report of the two men and their belief in the 10 caused great fear among them. And fear makes you, or causes them to make decisions which they should not have made. And eventually, those decisions caused their death. So that we wouldn't have time to get into the details of that story, but later down, we'll see that all the men, or all the people, that congregation, the 2 million people from 20 years and older, all died in the wilderness. Because what they said, that God cannot save us from those people. They said, we, in our sight, we look like grasshoppers. And the people, they look like giants. They were comparing their own selves against the people. Now, if you put God in front, God is the one that's going to fight the battle, not them. But they didn't see it that way. They look at their situation, what they're going through now, what they're seeing, and they're doubting themselves. And so they said, we're going to go back to Egypt. We don't want to be here anymore. It's better for us to go back. But it got even worse. For they spent a whole night crying and saying, let's get ourselves new leaders. Again, fear makes you do some crazy stuff. Now, if you think, coming from Egypt, all the trials and the deliverance they had in the wilderness, remember the crossing of the Red Sea, remember God feeding them with manna, in all different areas, they saw the power of God. But because of those 10 spies and the report, they decided, we're going back. And not only were we going back, we want new leaders to go back. So they are going to forget Moses and Aaron, the servants of God, and they wanted new leaders. But it got even worse. As though that wasn't bad enough, they decided to put them to death. They said, let us stone them. Now, in those days, execution mainly was done by stoning. So once you hear somebody's getting stoned, the purpose behind it is to put them to death. So they decided to put their leaders now to death. And that was all because of fear. The fear that was instilled in them by the 10 leaders. And it is a false fear. There was no need for that because God was going to take them through. So my encouragement to us as believers, we are not to look on circumstances around us and come up with a solution. Even though it seems simple and it seems plain and it really looks like something rational, we are not to let the circumstances that we are in cause us to make decisions, because the circumstances brings fear, and fear causes us to make irrational choices. Also with the unbeliever, people who have not given themselves over to the Lord. You might listen to preachers or ministers that are popular, and without examining the word, you could fall into what they are teaching very easily and be led astray. And fear can grip you and say you make bad choices. So it is a responsibility on those who are leading to say the right things, to preach the right word. And for those who are receiving, you have to make a decision. Because the people had to decide, are you going to go with the 10, or you're going to go with the 2? And like everything else, we like to go with the majority. You go to buy food and you look at, there's a stall of establishments, and you look to see which one is more busy or which one is busier. And the one that has more customers, you tell yourself, this is the better one. And this one here, the food might be better, but because it's slow, you feel it's not that good. So popularity and where it seems to have more traffic, you associate that with being right or being the good path. But what the Lord tells us, that broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are there that find it. So the 2 men, the 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, they were the perfect the perfect spies, given the right report, while the other 10, they gave a bad report. And they were able to change the minds of so many people and lead them astray. But we are trusting God this morning that we are not going to let anything take us out from the path that God has for us. We are not going to shift to the right or to the left. And for those who might be struggling, to those who might be going through some pain of one sort or the next, and you have been in that position for so long, and you tell yourself, surely there is no God, or God is not hearing me, or God is not seeing me. As we have read, God sees, He hears, and He is coming down. This morning could be a morning when God comes down and touches your lives. Whether it's your life personally, or your family lives, or someone that you know, God is more than capable to come down and to make a difference. But you have something to do. You have a part to play. What we realize in that story, as I come to the end of it, God didn't take away the challenges in the promised land. When the people decided, well, it is too hard, we cannot overcome it, the walls against the city are too high, the people are too strong, so we can't do it. He didn't say, okay, I'm going to break the walls for you, I'm going to get rid of the people, you will no longer will see yourself as grasshoppers, I'll make you giants and them grasshoppers. He didn't change anything. Everything remained the same. But what he did, all those from 20 years and under, he himself led them to enter the promised land. And those who saw the problem and let the problem control their lives, and who actually said it was better for them to die in the wilderness, they got what they asked for, because they all perished in the wilderness. And a journey that should have taken them 10 days caused the other 20 years and younger 40 years going through the same, covering the same distance. So the point is that we are not to give way to circumstances. And if you have been, or if you have heard in the past that there is a God who loves you, there's a God who cares, and who has a place for you, or maybe you've never heard about it, it doesn't change the situation. That he made a promise that he is coming again to receive anyone who is prepared. And how do you get prepared? Because to get into that land, you have to be prepared. God showed and he gave examples on what to expect in the land. And one of the reasons he did that was not only for them to know what is there, but to be prepared. Because as I said earlier, they had no idea of any life outside of slavery. So God is preparing them by giving them a detailed outline as to what to expect. God has a place that he has prepared for us, and for us to go in and to conquer it or to accept it or to receive it, we ourselves have to be prepared. And very briefly, how do I prepare to go into the promised land that God has for us, that we know as heaven? The Bible tells us clearly that except we be born again, we cannot enter into heaven. We cannot enter into the kingdom of God. So it's a very simple preparation that is needed. All that is needed is to be born again. And you say, it's simple for you, but what does that mean? What is born again? Well, it's very easy. God sent Jesus Christ into the world to die for us. Why he did that? Because he knew we had sin. We were born in sin. It's nothing we had done to be sinners. We were born that way. And God knew that we cannot enter into the promised land in that condition. So he sent Jesus Christ to die for that sin. So all we have to do is to believe that. Believe Jesus Christ came, he died, and most importantly, he rose again. And now we accept that. We accept Jesus Christ paying the price for our sins. And if we should do that, and we ask him to come into our lives, come into our heart, and save us, we believe it in our heart, and we say it out with our mouth, that yes, Jesus died for us, or he died for me. And if you accept that and you believe that, then you are saved. And your being saved, it simply means you are prepared now to enter into that promised land. The alternative of that is not a good one. Because if you fail to accept that, then there's another place you will be going. And your wilderness is hell. And this is a place of torment. And no one wants to be there. So it is our desire, and it is our prayer, that anyone who has never given their heart to Jesus Christ, who have never received you have never received the provision that God made through Jesus Christ, this morning could be a morning when you do so. This morning could be a day, a new day in your life, where now you can have confidence in meeting God, knowing that you are ready, knowing that you are prepared. So I trust and we pray that God will give you the courage to make that decision, that your understanding will be open to receive Jesus Christ and be prepared, not only for now, but for the life that is to come. May that be the case with anyone who is seeking Jesus Christ for his name's sake.
I'll thank our brother Nathaniel for his word this morning. And the invitation is